On May the 11th of 2021, Greek authorities were called to a suburban home in the capital of Athens, where 19-year-old Caroline Crouch had been murdered. Her husband and the father of her 11-month-old daughter was 33-year-old Greek pilot Babis Ananostopoulos. He told law enforcement that a gang of masked Albanian or Georgian men had broken into their home. They had reportedly tied him up and attacked Crouch as well as their pet dog, Roxy. Crouch was killed by suffocation while Roxy was hanged by its leash from the stair rail. The men allegedly removed the memory card from the surveillance camera located on the ground floor of the residence before fleeing with cash and jewelry. Ananostopoulos claimed that he'd fainted throughout the attack, but a police investigation would find several discrepancies in his story. The memory card had been removed from the surveillance cameras at 01:20 instead of 04:30, which, according to Anastopoulos, was the time the intruders had entered the home. Biometrics on Crouch's smartwatch indicated that her heart had stopped beating at 4:11 a.m. and an analysis of Anastopoulos' phone indicated he'd used several apps while he was supposedly bound and gagged. Moreover, there was no DNA or fingerprints from the robbers present at the scene, nor any sign of a breach at the window through which they'd allegedly gained access to the home. 6 weeks after Crouch's murder, law enforcement flew to Alonissos and met with Anastopoulos while he was attending a memorial service for his late wife. He was asked to fly back to Athens after being told that important new information had emerged regarding Crouch's murder. Anastopoulos was confronted with the evidence and further questioned until he admitted that he'd fatally suffocated his wife with a pillow and strangled their pet dog before concocting the home invasion story. He motivated the killing as a consequence of constant friction between them, which, as indicated by entries in Crouch's diary, stemmed from Anastopoulos being a control freak. The man, who was described by psychiatrists as suffering from extreme narcissistic personality disorder, was convicted of Crouch's murder in May of 2022 and was sentenced to a minimum of 27 years behind bars. In the documentary The Murder of Caroline Crouch, a Faking It special on Discovery Plus, body language expert Dr. Cliff Lansley argued that the killer had given away his guilt prior to being discovered while forcing himself to shed tears during an interview, playing the part of grieving husband. Anastopoulos poked his fingers into the corners of his eyes so that he could cry for the news camera. He pushed so hard that one of his eyelids briefly flipped inside out before returning to its normal position. Lansley noted, "When we look back at his full face, there's no evidence of sadness on his face." Another indication that the killer was lying, Lansley argued, was that he'd shrugged a single shoulder. The expert claimed that clusters of such shrugs gave a huge degree of confidence that he's faking it. Number 6. Sarah Comrie. Manhattan hospital worker Sarah Comrie became known to the internet as City Bike Karen following a viral clip in which she was seen arguing with a young black man. The dispute, which occurred on May the 12th of 2023, was over who had actually rented a bike. The unidentified teen with whom Comrie was arguing was accompanied by several others, and the 90-second viral clip was captured mid-conflict. The teen kept his hands on the bike, as did Comrie, who was still wearing scrubs after having finished a 12-hour shift. The teen prevented Comrie from leaving the dock, insisting that he'd paid for the bike. The clip began with the hospital worker repeatedly shouting for help while demanding that the teen get off her. At one point, she took his phone out of his hand, but he quickly retrieved it. The woman, who was 6 months pregnant at the time, then told the teen, "You're hurting my fetus, you're hurting my unborn child," even though she was the one who was actively pushing her stomach into his arm. As another scrub-clad hospital worker approached them, Comrie started to fake cry and asked for his help. The man behind the camera told her, "You're not crying, I got you on video." Comrie then started pushing the bike while sobbing, "Help me." The young man insisted that the bike was on his account, and Comrie eventually got off before the video ended with someone at the scene telling her, "Not a tear came down, miss," As the clip gained attention on social media, Comrie was branded a racist Karen who tried to get a young black man arrested. She was placed on leave by the hospital where she worked and faced the possibility of losing her job. She elicited the help of attorney Justin Marino, who later in May provided the New York Post with receipts confirming that Comrie had in fact rented the bike. Nevertheless, her fake crying and overall behavior during the incident had irrevocably damaged her in the court of public opinion. Marino described his client as literally a hero who was vilified by social media to the point that she had to go into hiding and was receiving death threats. To help pay for her legal bills, the hospital worker's family set up a GoFundMe called Help Sarah Comrie Fight Being Branded a Karen. Number 5. Gemma Barton and Craig Crouch. On the morning of December the 30th of 2020, the lifeless body of Jacob Crouch was found at his home in Linton, Derbyshire, England. A medical examination revealed that he had 39 rib fractures, 19 visible bruises, and internal injuries. Jacob had succumbed to peritonitis, a lethal infection he had developed following blunt force trauma. For months, Jacob had been regularly assaulted by his stepfather, Craig, while his mother, Gemma Barton, had failed to intervene or seek medical help for him. 24 of Jacob's rib fractures had been caused in the week leading up to his death. Barton and Crouch were seen on body cam footage crying crocodile tears and maintaining they were innocent. When the police came to arrest them at their home, a chilling message from Crouch to Barton offered some insight into his deranged state of mind prior to the killing. Crouch, who was at the time in his late 30s, said that he stood at the top of a chain of command at his workplace and demanded the same level of control be given to him at home, adding, "There is always a hierarchy." A judge later deemed that Barton, who'd also been in an abusive relationship with Jacob's biological father, had responded to Crouch's behavior with submissive and meek, misplaced affection. She thus became either oblivious or complicit to the fact that he was harming Jacob. By the summer of 2023, she was acquitted of murder and instead sentenced to 10 years imprisonment for causing or allowing the death of her son. Crouch was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 28 years after he was found guilty of murder and 3 counts of cruelty. Number 4. Louie Cadman. In November of 2022, Louie Cadman was captured on CCTV following a woman after she'd left a bar in Leighton Buzzard, Bedfordshire, England. The woman, who was severely inebriated, had lost her phone and had become separated from her friends. 25-year-old Cadman followed her into an alleyway from Lake Street towards Duncombe Drive. He filmed her on his cell phone as she urinated in the alleyway, while making explicit comments about her body parts. He then proceeded to orally abuse her. After the assault, the woman approached door staff at a nearby pub, crying, and told them what had happened. Bedfordshire police were called to the scene and they arrested Cadman in the area. During his video-recorded police interview, the predator denied any wrongdoing, claiming he was a very sensitive person. He was recorded saying, "I cry when I stand on an ant or a fly." However, he subsequently admitted to recording the woman describing his actions as disgusting and fake crying, while claiming he'd disappointed his family and his son. An examination of Cadman's phone revealed that he'd filmed other young women and a couple without their knowledge before he ultimately acted on his twisted fantasies with the unnamed victim in the alleyway. Cadman was sentenced to more than 9 years in prison after he was found guilty of the aforementioned abuse, voyeurism, possession of indecent images, and possession of cannabis. Number 3. Lewis Bush. On May the 12th of 2023, paramedics were called to the home of 44-year-old Kelly Pitt in Newport, Wales, after her battered body had been discovered by her daughter's partner under circumstances which were described as a bloodbath. Responding emergency workers found Pitt's lifeless body on her blood-soaked bed, covered with a duvet. The woman's face was swollen and purple as she'd been subjected to a prolonged beating. Mirror glass and clumps of hair were found around her body, and a hammer with hair on it was also found at the scene. A medical examination revealed that Pitt had suffered internal bleeding from 41 rib fractures and severe blunt force trauma to the head, neck, and trunk. On May the 10th, the mother of 3 had called her daughter Jordan. During the phone conversation, Kelly's son, 26-year-old Louis Bush, was heard verbally assaulting her in the background. Pitt pleaded with Jordan to call the police. The latter didn't do so, having been faced with similar situations in the past and believing the matter would resolve itself. Bush and Kelly were known to have a volatile relationship, and the former had beaten his mother several times in the past, usually as a way of forcing money out of her. 3 weeks prior, Pitt was seen with a black eye and told an acquaintance that her son had headbutted her and kicked her to the head, body, ribs, and legs. Leading up to May the 10th, Bush was subject to bail conditions preventing him from contacting his mother or attending her address. Regardless, he went to her home, and during Pitt's call with Jordan, Bush was heard screaming at his mother for not making him a bacon and sausage sandwich. Pitt's last words to Jordan were, "Ring the police." The latter repeatedly tried to contact her in the hours that followed. After beating his mother to death, Bush picked up her phone several times and told his sister she was unwell. On the morning of May the 12th, Bush messaged Jordan to say that their mother was unconscious and that she would need to call an ambulance for her. He tried to clean up the scene but eventually went out and was captured on CCTV buying a beer. Bush subsequently attended Newport Central Police Station, where he was arrested on suspicion of murder. As shown in body cam footage, Bush smiled and laughed upon being informed of the charge. When he was told that his mother was dead, he feigned shock, sat with his head between his legs and pretended to cry. As he was led to a police van, he continued to whimper and asked, "Is she really gone? Oh no." In spite of initially claiming he was innocent, Bush eventually pleaded guilty to his mother's murder. On November the 10th of 2023, he was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum of 16 years served. Today's topic was requested by 1before101. If you have any other topics you'd like to learn about, subscribe and let us know in the comments section below. Number 2. Emma Jane Magson. Following a night out in Leicester, England on March the 27th of 2016, Emma Jane Magson got into a drunken row with her boyfriend, 26-year-old James Knight. An altercation followed, during the course of which Magson stabbed Knight in the chest with a 4.5-inch knife, piercing his heart. The woman waited for 45 minutes before she called the emergency services. She then calmly talked to the operator as she watched her boyfriend dying. Magson claimed that Knight was making weird noises and that she didn't know what was happening to him. She noted that there was blood on him, but at no point mentioned the stab wound, which she would later admit to have inflicted. When an operator told her that an ambulance might be delayed due to the busy bank holiday weekend, Magson replied, "No, that's fine, don't worry about it. I just think he's too smashed. That's what I think." Magson was arrested and during the trial that followed claimed she'd acted in self-defense. The argument that prevailed, however, was that she'd purposefully delayed getting help for Knight, who might have lived had she acted sooner. At the end of 2016, Magson was convicted of murder and jailed for life with a minimum term of 17 years. Body cam footage later released by Leicestershire Police would show Magson faking distress upon first interacting with responding police. She became agitated and screamed, "I don't care, just get my boyfriend out." She started crying and banging on the door while screaming, "I want my boyfriend," and "James, come on." We'll line up our previous release about people who got caught faking it. Stick around if you'd like to watch that one as well still. Number 1. Kane Mitchell. Leading up to the fall of 2019, Kane Mitchell and Lucy Smith were living together at an apartment in St Neots, Cambridgeshire, England. Mitchell wasn't the biological father of Smith's son, Teddy, but he helped care for him. On November the 1st, Teddy was taken to the local hospital with a number of devastating injuries. He had 17 broken ribs and a fractured skull, in addition to brain, spinal, and eye damage. Neither Mitchell nor Smith could account for how he'd been hurt, but suspicion immediately fell upon them, and the police were called. Body cam footage from a responding officer captured the moment that Mitchell fake cried while pretending to be a doting father at the hospital. He sobbed in the intensive care unit, telling Teddy, "Come on baby, daddy's here," when it became apparent that Mitchell had in fact inflicted the horrific injuries. He was arrested. The man insisted that he hadn't harmed the victim and shouted that he wasn't going to leave his son. It would emerge that he'd repeatedly attacked Smith's son at their home by smashing him against a hard surface and crushing his body with his bare hands. Teddy died after spending 11 days in the intensive care unit. Detective Inspector Lucy Thompson noted of Mitchell, he is completely devoid of any remorse or empathy. Mitchell's former partner, a woman only identified as Olivia, spoke about his violent behavior to the media in the aftermath. Olivia reported that during their relationship, the police had been called to their home over 24 times. The woman noted that even though she had photos and videos documenting the injuries she'd suffered at Mitchell's hands, the police hadn't taken her seriously. Olivia recalled, "I told the police if you do not stop him, he's going to end up killing me or a woman or a child." Mitchell was ultimately found guilty of Teddy's murder and sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 18 years served. Smith was convicted of cruelty, as she'd reportedly waited for over half an hour to call the police. After her son had been attacked, she was given a 2-year community order and was thus free to walk out of Cambridge Crown Court. Number 8. Sharita Dixon Cole. Texas State Trooper Daniel Hubbard pulled over a female motorist on suspicion of drunk driving in the early hours of May the 20th of 2018. The woman, Sharita Dixon Cole, was ultimately arrested and charged with driving while intoxicated. In the incident's wake, she publicly accused Officer Hubbard of forcefully groping her inside and outside of his patrol car during the course of the traffic stop. The 37-year-old's claims quickly spread online, with the help of prominent social activist Sean King and attorney Lee Merritt, both of whom shared various posts about the alleged assault. In response to Dixon Cole's accusations, the Texas Department of Public Safety released a 2-hour-long video of Officer Hubbard's body cam footage from the evening of the traffic stop. In the recording, Dixon Cole was shown performing a series of field sobriety tests, all of which she failed. The woman was then taken into custody and booked into the Ellis County Jail. At no point was Officer Hubbard shown to have exhibited any of the abusive behavior detailed in Dixon Cole's allegations. She subsequently issued a formal apology to the policeman and admitted that the assault had been a fabrication. The false claims were susceptible to legal action, but the Ellis County District Attorney announced that no additional charges would be filed against Dixon Cole other than the original count of driving while intoxicated. Number 7. Vanessa Blanchard. On October the 29th of 2021, a school resource officer in Clarksville, Tennessee, contacted Vanessa Blanchard to inquire as to why her child hadn't been attending school in recent days. Blanchard claimed that her 12-year-old son, whom subsequent reports indicated suffered from autism, had passed away following a seizure 2 days earlier. Officials at New Providence Middle School subsequently raised money in an effort to help the 39-year-old mother pay for her son's funeral. Suspicions arose after school staff contacted the funeral home Blanchard claimed to be using and were told that no arrangements were being made for the boy in question. Upon being presented with this information, Blanchard claimed that she was still waiting for the autopsy results from Tenover Hospital before setting plans for the funeral into motion. Further suspicious revelations came to light, however, after the laptop issued to Blanchard's son by the school was found to be active at the Vacation Motor Hotel in Clarksville. Montgomery County Sheriff's deputies were dispatched to the hotel, where they reportedly found Blanchard's son alive and by himself in one of the rooms. The boy's mother ultimately admitted to faking his death and leaving him at the hotel for 2 weeks, during which she claimed to have periodically checked in on him. Blanchard was consequently arrested and charged with contributing to the delinquency of a child and false impression of death. Number 6. William Spivey. The police chief in Chadbourne, North Carolina, was relieved of duty in the spring of 2021 following an official probe into allegations of misconduct. According to the Horry County Police Department, 36-year-old William Spivey was charged with over 70 felony crimes including drug trafficking, embezzlement of state property, and evidence mishandling. Roughly a year following the announcement of the disgraced chief's various offenses, he was reported missing after failing to show up for a court appearance. Spivey's aunt, with whom he'd been staying while out on bond, told investigators that he'd gone on a fishing trip on the Lumber River on February the 21st of 2022. It was around that time that the Columbus County Sheriff's Office received a tip about an abandoned boat on the river, prompting a widespread search effort by multiple local and state agencies. The boat Spivey had taken out on the water was quickly found, along with a death note he'd supposedly written and a .22 caliber rifle with a discharged round. Although the evidence appeared to suggest that the former police chief had taken his own life, investigators concluded it was unlikely that said scenario had actually occurred. 3 days later, the authorities were notified that Spivey was in fact alive and that he'd been hiding at his aunt's house after faking his own death. When officers approached the residence, Spivey fled into nearby woods, where he was eventually found hiding in a creek and taken back into custody. Number 5. Rachel Matisse. In the early morning hours of June the 23rd of 2016, Rachel Matisse went missing while she was on a camping trip with her family near Wils, New York. The 24-year-old's disappearance triggered a massive search effort throughout the Adirondack Mountains that came to include over 100 state police officers, rangers, and volunteers. In the weeks that followed, state authorities received and followed up on roughly 400 leads from the public, but none of them yielded any results. Then on July the 6th, the search came to a sudden conclusion when Matisse showed up at her family's Johnstown residence. She claimed to have been kidnapped by a bearded man in his 50s or 60s who smelled strongly of cigarettes. Matisse also detailed how her alleged abductor had repeatedly assaulted her and held her captive in a shed before eventually dropping her off 2 blocks from her family's house. The police were able to use Matisse's description to create a composite sketch of the suspect that was subsequently released to the public. In a surprising twist of events, however, it was announced that a warrant had been issued for Matisse's arrest on July the 23rd. Upon detecting several inconsistencies between Matisse's story and certain pieces of electronic and medical evidence, investigators concluded that the young woman had fabricated her abduction entirely. Furthermore, eyewitnesses revealed that they'd seen Matisse at a camp belonging to a relative's boyfriend during the period in which she was supposedly missing. She was ultimately charged with falsely reporting an incident, and in June of 2017 she was sentenced to 4 weeks in jail, 3 years of probation, and 100 hours of community service. Number 4. Trent Freeman. A former sheriff's deputy from Gilchrist County, Florida, was taken into custody in December of 2021 after it was discovered that she'd lied about being hospitalized with COVID-19. According to related reports from local news outlet WCJB, 38-year-old Trent Freeman claimed to have been admitted to the hospital after contracting the virus in the fall of 2021. Over the next 2 months, the deputy allegedly forged multiple doctors' signatures and falsified her medical records to maintain the fraudulent claim that she'd become comatose while undergoing treatment. Freeman was actually in perfect health and had begun working full-time at what was described as a private sector non-law enforcement job. Her superiors at the county sheriff's office began to suspect her fraud in early October. Following an investigation by the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, it was determined that Freeman had been lying about her medical condition, therefore swindling her colleagues out of more than $3,700 in paid sick time. After Freeman was fired from her position on October the 15th, a warrant was issued for her arrest. She ultimately turned herself in, whereupon she was charged with 2 counts of uttering a forged instrument and 1 count of scheme to defraud. Number 3. Timothy Wilkes. Shortly after 9 p.m. on February the 5th of 2021, police officers in Nashville, Tennessee were dispatched to the parking lot of an urban air indoor trampoline park in response to reports of a shooting on the premises. 23-year-old David Starnes Jr. openly admitted to the officers that he'd fatally shot an individual later named as Timothy Wilkes, aged 20. Starnes denied initiating the deadly altercation and reported that it was Wils who'd first approached a group of people while wielding a butcher knife and claiming that he was going to rob them. Starnes, who was a part of the group being threatened, sought to defend himself and the others by pulling out a handgun and firing at Wils. The authorities later determined that Wils, a local YouTuber, and his friend had been attempting to film a video in which they captured the reactions of people being held at knife point. The prank robbery ultimately had a dramatic outcome for the young man, who failed to anticipate the possibility that one of the video's subjects might act in self-defense to his fake attack. As of the latest updates on the matter, neither Starnes nor Wilkes' friend had been charged in connection to the incident. Number 2. Ava Coleman and Christopher Kratzer. At about 6 p.m. on July the 3rd of 2019, several concerned citizens contacted the Forsyth County Sheriff's Office in Georgia to report a suspected kidnapping in the parking lot of the Collection Shopping Center. According to eyewitness testimony, 17-year-old Ava Coleman was crying out for help and screaming, "He's going to kill me," while sitting in a Chevrolet Tahoe with her hands bound and head covered by what appeared to be a pillowcase. 8 sheriff's deputies were rushed to the scene in a swift and ample law enforcement response that reportedly included more than half of the South Forsyth police force. The vehicle in which Coleman had been seen was subsequently located at another nearby parking lot, and law enforcement initiated a traffic stop. The occupants were ordered out of the vehicle at gunpoint. Shortly thereafter, it was discovered that the alleged kidnapping had actually been a hoax devised by Coleman and 19-year-old Christopher Kratzer. The teens had reportedly planned to film the elaborate stunt in order to post it on social media. Although no one was harmed during the incident, a spokesman for the county sheriff's office contended that Coleman and Kratzer were fortunate the situation hadn't escalated further. They'd fabricated a high-tension scenario that could have resulted in them or other members of the public being hurt. The pair consequently faced felony charges of raising a false alarm and a misdemeanor count of reckless conduct. Number 1. Jessica Ann Smith. Through a Facebook post from June of 2019, Pennsylvania resident Jessica Ann Smith announced that she'd been diagnosed with colon cancer. The 31-year-old was quickly met with an overwhelmingly sympathetic response. On the 10th of the month, she created a Facebook fundraiser titled #FightLikeAJessica, which she used to raise money for her purported extensive medical bills. Smith also allegedly started a GoFundMe campaign towards the same end, and she ultimately received more than $10,000 in donations across the 2 fundraising platforms. The authorities were first notified of the situation on June the 19th, when a female acquaintance of Smith's contacted the Euclid Township Police Department. She reportedly stated that to the best of her knowledge, Smith hadn't actually been diagnosed with cancer of any form. On July the 31st, Smith's husband filed an official police report in which he alleged that his wife had fraudulently obtained the Facebook and GoFundMe donations under the false pretense that she was ill. He also revealed that he knew for a fact that Smith hadn't been diagnosed with cancer, as she was covered on the medical insurance he received through his employer. In November of 2019, Smith was arrested and charged with theft by deception and other theft-related counts. She was ultimately sentenced to 3 years of probation and mental health treatment in January of 2021. Thanks for watching. Would you rather lie to spare someone's feelings or tell them the truth knowing it might hurt them? Let us know in the comments section below.